The Business of Biotech is produced by Life Science Connect and its community of learning, solving, and sourcing resources for biopharma decision makers. If you're working on biologics process development and manufacturing challenges, you need to swing by bioprocessonline.com. If you're trying to stay ahead of the cell or gene therapy curve, visit cellandgene.com. When it's time to map out your clinical course, let clinicalleader.com help. And if optimizing outsourcing decisions is what you're after, check out outsourcepharma.com. We're Life Science Connect, and we're here to help. We've dropped a few episodes digging into CDMO sponsor relationships, episodes 182 with Scorpius and Fina Bio, and episode 173 with Forge and Ray Therapeutics come to mind as a couple of recent examples, but none of those episodes highlight an outsourcing partnership quite as unique as the one we're digging into today. I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech, and on today's show, we're talking with CTMC co-founder and CEO, Dr. Jason Bach, and clinical stage cell therapy company KSQ Chief Technology Officer, Thomas Leach, about the unique beginnings of a boutique CDMO, the even more unique aspects of its partnership model, and how the collaboration has accelerated the development of KSQ's TIL program. Jason and Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Matt, for having us.
Great to be here. It's good to see you again, Matt.
Oh, it's great to see you guys too. I'm really looking forward to this one, and I'm honored that you've chosen to spend your time with us and sharing the story with us. And the story, the origin story of CTM. So normally I wouldn't do this. Normally I'd be like, hey, this is all about the sponsor. I'm going to ask the CDMO to chime in a little bit here and there. But in this case, because CTMC's origins are so interesting, that origin story is so interesting, that's where I want to start, Jason. So I want to begin with you, and I just want to ask you to tell us that origin story, sort of about the way that CTMC came to be an enabler of translation from academic science to industrial therapeutic development. I mean, that transition that happened there.
Yeah, that's a great description. So thanks for the opportunity. So leading up to starting CTMC, I had over a 20-year career in small, medium, large-size biotech and biopharma, developing biologics, protein therapeutics, mostly antibody therapeutics. And with the commercial approval of the first-generation CAR-Ts, I saw this tremendous potential of this new therapeutic modality, and yet could also tell that the biggest challenge of this was not clinical efficacy. It was amazing in terms of curing cancer in late stage patients, and yet the manufacturing challenges were going to be the thing that limited the potential of this field. And that's what I had spent a long time developing in biologics and seeing antibody field develop from over the course of 20 years. And so I wanted to find some way of accelerating cell therapy as a field. And coincidentally, some of the leadership from MD Anderson Cancer Center had reached out to me and talking about how we could potentially work together. And so we put our heads together and decided to try something very new. And I moved my family down to Houston, Texas, and took a position within MD Anderson to essentially create an internal biotech focused on cell therapy that would work with the academicians at MD Anderson closely, take their research concepts, help them to industrialize that, manufacture those, handle regulatory interactions in a very industrial way, and then bring those into the MD Anderson clinic to establish proof of concept.
Yeah. Jason, I want to interrupt you there real quick because I'm as you describe this, it occurs to me, like, I have a lot of conversations with academicians. I have a lot of conversations with sort of translational stage biotech builders, aspirational biotech builders. And I'm always amazed, like this concept that you're describing right now is novel in and of itself, because I'm always amazed at the gap that at least I perceive based on what I hear, the gap between molecular discovery in any modality and how do I make this into a business? Like, how do I take this thing to the point where I feel like I can reach some, develop it to reach some patients? Do you see, I mean, is that a thing, or is it just my imagination?
1,000%, a billion percent. I couldn't agree more. And it's amazing because it's just an aspect of exposure. These professors are incredibly smart, much smarter than me. Um, but they just haven't had exposure to industrialization and therapeutics development and quality by design and how to really approach regulatory interactions. And especially, I think this is especially true in cell therapy, where it was in the purview of academic medical centers for 20 years until the last 7, maybe 10 years, where it started to get more industrialized. Mm-hmm. And so even more to that extent in manufacturing, where a lot of the manufacturing for these cell therapies were in academic medical centers run by super smart professors, often in like stem cell transplant group, where there's some adjacencies. But there's a gap between that and therapeutics development with commercial intent.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, the insight that the leadership at MD Anderson had about creating this internal group. And I should say, to give them full credit, they had sort of even test modeled this, if you will, with small molecules previously, and built an industrial group to do this with small molecules. And that had been successful in generating, over the course of 6 or 7 years, 7 or 8 clinical candidates that went to IND and ended up being partnered with biotech companies along the way. So we had a little bit of precedence for this at MD Anderson, but then doing it with cell therapy, where we were going to really take control of the manufacturing, was a whole different level of approach. And I really credit MD Anderson sort of vision and leadership for willing to do big things. You often hear about that being the motto of Texas, and it really is true. MD Anderson, one of their slogans is "Do no small things,"
yeah. And
they are the #1 cancer center in the world, and take that very seriously, and not just try and okay, let's just incrementally do things. Let's do things that maybe we're the only ones who can do.
Yeah.
That's a little bit was when we got together and we started brainstorming. That was my #1 question. And I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but when I was being recruited, I got about 15 minutes with the president of MD Anderson. And it's like, what do you want to know? And my only question for you is, are you willing to do big things? Or is this going to be an academic initiative that we announce and, fund through, $100,000 grants and things?
Yeah.
And he was like, we want to do big things.
He's like, you're in Texas, man.
Yeah.
Everything we do is big.
We do no small things here. We own that we're the #1 cancer center, and we want to use that to propel things forward with bold initiatives, step changes.
Yeah.
So to that end, I won't go too far, but okay, so then you flash forward just a couple months, I take the job, start working at MD Anderson. We identified a local cell therapy development and manufacturing facility that I'm sitting in today that's, was just a couple hundred yards down the road from MD Anderson. 60,000 square foot industrial facility that Bellicum Pharmaceuticals had built to very high standards to use for their clinical manufacturing and even for their plans for their launch. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of, especially cell therapy biotech companies, had made the decision that they want to divest their facility. And we became aware of it and jumped to the front of the line. And then I came back to that MD Anderson and president. I'm like, hey, remember when you said you wanted to do big things? How about we buy a facility? And he said yes. And so that was how we really got started.
And that was that the point with was that sort of the inflection point that you look back on and say like that's when we started turning the corner from sort of being this translational enabler to something more akin to a CDMO?
Well,
Or would
yeah,
you
I mean,
not, am I unfairly characterizing when I use the CDMO term?
yeah, I don't really like CDMO term. It's more we're see, and I'll just like you started with this origin story, we were created as an internal biotech
Yeah.
to help MD Anderson professors develop their products. So rather than for every, uh, like traditionally the path is an academic has an idea, patents it, spins it out as a biotech company, tries to raise money. Like MD Anderson had enough resources to try and do a lot of this and almost like incubate these companies internally. And so we would play the role of that early stage biotech of working with the academic discovery, industrializing it, carrying out IND enabling studies, supporting regulatory interactions, and then designing a clinical study with MD Anderson clinicians to get to clinical proof of concept. So manufacturing is, especially for cell therapies, was a key part of that, was like foundational part of that. But there were many other supportive elements of it too, to help get the interesting discoveries to patients.
Yeah.
In a robust way.
Yeah. All right. So I think, Thomas, I did bring you on the show for a reason.
Sorry. Once you get me started,
I love it. It's all good stuff. It's terrific stuff. And Thomas's story, and sort of the origin story of the CTMC KSQ relationship will, I think, illustrate a lot of what you were just talking about, Jason. So Thomas, I want to turn to you, and I want to learn a little bit about KSQ and specifically where KSQ was in terms of your transition from target exploration to therapeutic development back in the days before you met Jason.
Sure. Well, I think the origin story that Jason described came along at the perfect time for KSQ Therapeutics. At the time, our gene edited TIL programs were at a really crucial point. We were very, very far along in the discovery process, and we'd done a ton of really terrific process and analytical development work, but we were not yet to an IND clearance for our first therapy. And I think maybe to take a step back and talk about the origins of KSQ would help explain maybe why that is. We were founded on this idea that there could be a better way to uncover optimal targets for oncology. And with the emergence of CRISPR gene editing technology years ago, we believed that we could do an unbiased genome-wide screen that would reveal the best performing gene targets. Not what we thought the best targets should be, but the actual best performing targets. And that's exactly what we did. And then we applied it in a number of different ways. And we found that when we systematically knocked out each gene and then looked at the performance across a range of different cancer models, those experiments revealed a collection of high-value targets that up until that time had been largely overlooked. So now fast forward, some of those targets we're pursuing with partners, and some of those targets we're developing ourselves. And just last year, we announced that we had executed out-licensing deals with Roche and Ono Pharmaceuticals. And then we've also maintained a long-running research collaboration with the terrific team at Takeda. But in addition to the ones that we're outsourcing, there are a number of those targets that we're actually developing ourselves. Our two lead candidates are gene-edited TIL cell therapies. And this is where we arrive at the partnership with Jason's team at CTMC. By late 2022, when Jason and I first met, KSQ-001EX, which is a single edit gene knockout, and KSQ-004EX, a dual edit therapy, the team at KSQ had done a terrific job of developing both of those to the point where we had an early version of our manufacturing process, and we needed to take the next step and then secure clinical supply. And that's what brought us together with CTMC. Our platform led us to some unique and very promising targets. But as you alluded to earlier, Matt, having a target is not the same thing as having a therapy, and having a therapy is not the same thing as delivering a patient outcome. And our partnership with CTMC has really helped us accelerate those leaps from target to therapy to uninterrupted supply and ultimately patient outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I'm going to paraphrase. The last time we spoke, you were telling me, you're giving me a little bit of color on the development of those candidates. internally. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like, tell us, like, what were the challenges that you were struggling with that made the introduction to Jason fortuitous?
Sure. Well, for starters, I mean, cell therapy is not for the faint of heart, right?
Yeah.
There is no shortage of difficulties when it comes to developing complex therapies like this. But we were confident in the targets. We felt good about the process and analytics that we had developed up until that point. But our main difficulty, and something that is something that was really not uncommon to biopharma companies, we were really struggling to identify a partner that could support our program timelines with supply.
Mm.
And in all of our conversation with potential partners, it went something like, we can slot you in at this future date, or we can start the work at this site and then transition it to a new site midstream. And that is completely understandable. I get it. Those are common business constraints that everyone faces, and I've had those conversations more than a few times over my career. And no CMO wants to delay a therapy from getting to patients. No one wants to do that. But with every option that we were looking at, our program timelines would get pushed out and our patients would be left waiting. And we just had to find a different way. And CTMC helped us find it.
Were those timeline challenges, some of those challenges you said you've run into many times in your career, were they relative at all to the time, to the year, 2022, or given your experience pre and post COVID and everything, all the disruption that caused, is that more chronic than just sort of that point in time issue?
COVID didn't help, that's for sure, right? Nothing got faster during COVID. But I would also say that when we look at the late teens, there was still a capacity that was being brought online across cell therapy. And the capacity was still catching up with a lot of the discovery work and clinical demand that was emerging. And so I don't think that we're in necessarily that same place today. But at the time, late teens, early 20s, yeah, we were still chasing capacity that was trying to catch up with a lot of the groundbreaking discovery work that was happening.
Yeah.
If I could just add, Matt, to that, just to add on to what Tom was saying about cell therapy in general, goes even more so for TIL. I think, we're starting to get our arms around CAR-T now as a field, and processes are becoming platform and the like. But in TIL, the manufacturing platforms are still huge differentiators because, it's a big challenge from, a scientific point of view to take a piece of a patient's tumor and extract the lymphocytes from that. Those lymphocytes have been beaten up, down, sideways, and are not that healthy. And so specifically, MD Anderson and CTMC have developed specific processes to enhance that more so than the traditional, what's called the Rosenberg or NCI process that's been used for more than 20 years to enhance the success rate in that extraction and the number of lymphocytes that can be expanded. And so that was also a part of what helped the acceleration by being able to leverage that manufacturing platform and combine it with all the impressive work KSQ had done before.
Yeah. Thomas, what was your first exposure to Jason and CTMC?
Well, I think in the field of TILs, we were well aware of them and what they could do. I could let Jason talk about the specifics, but they've been doing important work on TILs going back for quite a few years. And in fact, there are some folks on their team that have been working in TILs for a decade plus. So it's a really, really experienced group. And through conference and industry meetings, we knew each other's work really well. And when the opportunity presented itself to work together, that wasn't a particularly hard decision.
So how did the opportunity present itself?
Well, the reality was that we were searching for a home for supply of for clinical supply, and it was at one of those industry conferences where we had what was an ongoing series of discussions, and realized that we weren't just talking about the science of the discovery or the field of TILs, that there was an opportunity to actually collaborate here, and it took off very quickly from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll get into some of the details around that collaboration. But before the collaboration happened, you Thomas, you stated quite eloquently that CTMC's work sort of preceded itself. Like, you knew the reputation was there, you knew the work that they did. When you decided to really dig in and evaluate the potential for collaboration, did you feel like a lot of that sort of evaluation work had already been done because you knew the body of work that they had been working on, or was there a concerted evaluation process that KSQ dug into?
It wasn't a foregone conclusion, just based on the body of work that they had done. When we started looking at CTMC as a potential partner, what it came down to us was culture and technical capability, and in that order. And obviously CTMC's proved to be exceptional in both areas, but there's a really uncommon cultural fit among our teams. And I'm not talking about just Jason and me. We obviously get on very well, but that fit permeates at every level of the organization. We believe in the same things when it comes to how we ought to work together. And the first time we actually met that team, one of my teammates at KSQ leaned over to me in the meeting and said, "These guys are one of us." And I think that turned out to be true. All that other stuff you said is absolutely valid. Like, I would advise any company evaluating a potential supply partner to consider a wide variety of factors, like just depending upon what your specific needs are. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have that experience internally, there are more than a few consultants that can support you. But also understand that things like geography and room sizes and process fits and equipment, those factors are necessary but not sufficient to ensure success. When things go wrong, and they will go wrong, it's going to be culture and capability that get you through to the other side of it.
Mm. How do you? I want to stay there for a minute. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I want to hang here for a minute, because just recently I was exposed to a very complex and comprehensive decision tree matrix, whatever you want to call it, that, to your point, Thomas, that a consultant uses in helping sponsors evaluate CDMO capabilities. And it's rote. I mean, it's like, it's concrete. And that's wise for sure. Evaluating granular specifics around, supply chain redundancy and vendor certifications. And these are all, very, very important things in this business, boxes to check. I did not see any allusion to cultural, to cultural alignment on this scientific matrix that the consultant offered up to give me a look. How do you, like, besides the field, culture is always a tricky discussion for me to have with guests on the business of biotech, because it just gets fuzzy and, makes you feel good, but it's difficult to kind of wrap your arms around some concrete measurements of ensuring that cultural match is going to your point, Thomas, and it's a very important point, ensuring that cultural match is going to be what gets you through the hard times. So, like, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm asking you guys right now. I'm asking you for some, for some, some
we can bail you out, Matt.
Of, like, yeah, Jason, I'm going to stop talking and you know where I'm going.
I do.
Yeah.
Tom, do you want to go first?
I can start. So, Matt, you're exactly right. Squishy, fuzzy, fluffy. Yeah. Like, those are all words that we talk about it. But I will tell you, it is on our selection matrix. And I would encourage folks to add it to theirs, because you know it when you see it and you feel it when you don't have it. To try to make it concrete, one of the examples that I consistently see at the working team level, it's not only just how we choose to interact with one another in terms of authenticity or just being respectful, but there's just a really deep focus on the fundamental science on both sides of the collaboration. The other day, and Jason, I don't know if you were actually on this call the other day, I can't remember. The team at KSQ was reviewing some experimental results with the team at CTMC. And it was a really, really detailed, granular, technical topic. Detailed and technical to the point where with some partners, I'm not sure that there'd be a lot of interest in having that level of depth of discussion. But what I saw in the discussion with our teams was really different than what I've experienced in my past. The KSQ team is amazing. They are so talented and so experienced, and CTMC matches that. And in that discussion I was referring to, the CTMC folks were really drilling down into the details and in-depth technical discussions to the point where they were stopping and interrupting the KSQ presenter with questions based on their own previous experiences. Wait, why did you handle the cells that way? Or, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. That explains some results that we saw in our labs when we did X, Y, and Z last year. And what I saw in those interactions were really engaged, super passionate, experienced teammates who were really building on one another's ideas to advance kind of our shared understanding. If you have that in a partner, yeah, you've got something special. But Matt, ultimately, you're right. It feels squishy and fluffy, and you just know it when you see it.
Yeah, so well articulated, Tom. And Matt, I would say though that also you have that cultural alignment, but then you need to like undergird that with a business arrangement that helps support it and doesn't detract from it. And that's fundamentally why I think, especially for cell therapy, and when you asked me before about CDMO, which often uses like a fee for service model, we don't do that. Because it detracts exactly from this. If it's like you get what you incentivize, right? And so if your incentive is to just do services to get fees, okay, are we getting, you have a culture of that scientific collaboration that Tom alluded to, but it's hard to support, that over a long period of time if you're not getting paid for it somehow.
Yeah.
So what we came up with, in addition to like the connection with MD Anderson and the depth of scientific knowledge, is we wanted to have a business structure that enabled that kind of collaboration and essentially aligned our incentives so that we're all rowing in the same direction. And we can really act as almost like a internal part of KSQ's development and structure it so that there's, I think it's true that over the last year and a half, we've been working together. There's been 0 change orders.
That's right.
No change orders. No discussion of business terms at all. We worked through the contract. We signed that. And that was the last time we discussed, hey, and what I would say is, not everything has gone technically perfectly, as with any project. There's been some challenges. Okay, how are we going to overcome this? We saw that. And what I love about this model, and again, why I don't think we're really a CDMO, is all right, we need to do another experiment. Let's do that experiment. How do you think we should design it? What should be the controls? What arm should we do? Oh, that's a great idea. Do it this way. But none of those discussions involve like, oh, let me go back and look at the scope of work and see how many experiments we budgeted for, and let me go talk to the BD guys and see if we can do this. And that is part of what enables the speed, because it's just letting the science lead.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to sort of rewind a little bit, and talk a little bit. You talked about the contracting and how, the being on the hook and incentives are a little bit different than the normal post, contract experience. But we kind of skipped over the tech transfer type stuff, right? Like I want to learn about how that process redesign and tech transfer and this IND submission process that's also unique to me. I'm not like super experienced on the CDMO side, so I don't know how common it is for. I'll quit saying CDMO, Jason. I'll try to stop saying CDMO.
It's okay. Do I twitch every time you say that or something?
Sorry, manufacturing partner. I don't know to what degree that the prevalence of that go into the IND submission process arm in arm and in lockstep is common with an outsourced manufacturing collaboration. So tell me a little bit about that. Like when the trigger was pulled and you had to do some process and tech transfer type stuff, and then ultimately leading up to the IND submission process. I'm going to open it up to either one of you to start and kind of walk through that process.
I can start. I love telling the story, and I'll tell it to anybody that will listen.
Well, I'm listening.
It's been an amazing ride. So I first met the CTMC team in November of 2022. Subsequent to that, and it was shortly before the Thanksgiving holiday, we completed the contracting work, Our plan transitioned to a next-gen manufacturing process, developed all the analytics associated with it, executed engineering and then GMP batches, and then authored and submitted an IND. And 11 months after Jason and I shook hands for the first time in Houston, the IND for our lead candidate, KSQ-001EX, was cleared by FDA. So yeah, it's been a ride, and it's been fun all along the way.
Thomas, how does that, I mean, I'm sure it's apples to oranges to bananas comparisons along the trajectory of your career, the history of your career, but how does that experience kind of align or compare to previous experiences?
It's certainly faster. And, there's really no normal when it comes to a cell therapy, and there's no normal, especially when it's a company's first foray into a cell therapy IND submission.
Yeah, Jason, I mean, that's Thomas brings up, he asked the next question for me, because the story that you tell about the origin of CTMC and the fact that you had great resources and great people and super smart scientists and, all this resource, that's all fantastic. Like, you can sit around doing all sorts of super smart stuff. But unless you have some processes and procedures, you're not going to be able to stick to a timeline like the one that Thomas just described. So tell us a little bit about what's the setup at CTMC that sort of leads to or enables that kind of speed.
That's great lead up. The simple thing I can say is everything about how, I had the great opportunity to design CTMC basically from the ground up. It was like so it was personally for me to have seen all sorts of good, bad, ugly ways of doing things and being able to create something brand new that was fit for purpose solution was this amazing opportunity. And so I tried to think of everything, every aspect holistically of how we design CTMC, the people, the facility, the relationship with MD Anderson, how we approach contracting, how we structure partnerships is designed to accelerate projects moving from research stage to clinical proof of concept. So we're not only getting to that IND, which everyone always focuses on and is super important to get there very quickly, but then to be able to start the clinical study very quickly and not have that painful period where you're doing all the important things to set up clinical operations, but get those set up so we can start getting the product to patients. And then even how we can accelerate enrollment and make sure we get to 10, 15 patients of clinical data as quickly as possible. And so part of that is the regulatory process. And so we leverage MD Anderson's amazing relationship with FDA, and MD Anderson, for the most part, acts as sponsors for first-in-human studies, even with our biotech partners. And we at CTMC have a mature regulatory group, experienced regulatory group that authors documents in Viva, in electronic format, fully transparently with partners. They can edit. They have full editorial control of what goes into those submissions and final decision making. But we have a really good starting point to get them there. And then that process within MD Anderson of starting up an MD Anderson sponsored trial is quicker than an external sponsored trial. Yeah. And so then we're able to get to first patient in quicker as well. So it's eliminating as much of this white space as we can of sort of non-value, what I would call sort of non-value added activities for the therapy, right? You're doing important things when you're setting up clinical operations and activating a site, but you haven't really added any value to the therapy until you dose a patient, see a response, then you're talking value creation.
Yeah. When our mutual friend and colleague Kelly Beal pitched this story to me, I'm going to get this wrong, so I'm not even going to attempt it. But she made an allusion in the pitch to the value of the physical proximity to MD Anderson, and I find it's terrific, Jason. Those of you who are watching this episode versus listening to it, MD Anderson is directly over Jason's left shoulder, and that is not an AI generated background. But there were some specifics in there about like in the pitch about like the logistical advantages and the way that materials are even transported.
Yeah.
Give me some color on that and the advantages. Thomas, feel free to jump in here too. Like the advantages, even perceived and down the road advantages of that sort of proximity.
Right. Exactly. So, this started when I was talking to some biotech colleagues at startup cell therapy companies. This is 5 years ago, about how they were starting up a clinical study, and they would have multiple sites, and running an autologous cell therapy trial can be challenging because you really, unlike almost all other modalities, there's this coupling of the clinical trial and the manufacturing. It's all on-demand manufacturing. And especially when you're in a dose escalation or first in human, multi-site, everyone's jockeying, oh, I got a patient. Okay, line up a manufacturing slot. Okay, work out the logistics of getting the product from the patient, right? That's the starting material, to the manufacturing site, and then working out ways to get it back. And these are unfortunately very sick cancer patients that oftentimes can drop out of the study and things, and then that screws up all your logistics. And so because we were running these studies already with MD Anderson we've done many of these studies, we've got all those logistics worked out. And so for our partners, they don't have to bother with any of it. Just we coordinate directly with MD Anderson Clinic. When they have a patient, we work out that we make sure we have a slot, and we manufacture that product and then keep them informed and get that product back to the clinicians to infuse into the patients. Yeah. And so partners like KSQ have full visibility into what's going on, but have really no accountability. You don't have to worry about all those logistics, which can be a big thing. These, especially for, like I mentioned before, I talked to some smaller companies. They would have 5, 6, 7, 8 people in their logistics group to manage all these different things going on in the clinic, because it's complicated with cell therapies. And so that alleviates just that whole complexity. And again, allowing the science to come through, allowing the product to declare itself without having to worry about all these logistics.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to overstate the importance of just the logistical advantages that the CTMC has there. Being just down the street in the Texas Medical Center, they have established labeling and chain of custody and serialization that's already integrated with MD Anderson's system, so that CTMC knows what to give them, and MD Anderson's ready to receive it in a way that's frictionless for us, and that's important for a first in human trial like this.
Tom, I want to stick with you for a minute, because I'm curious about whether or not there was at any point in your evaluation a concern around, and I'm going to put this like very simply and rudimentary, in a very rudimentary way. Was there ever any concern? Jason just mentioned, the high head count that it takes to manage the logistics of a clinical trial. Very small companies, a company of 12 having 6 people, working on clinical trials. And in my experience, a lot of that has just sort of been a cost of doing business. Trials are distributed, finding patient populations requires a lot of logistical effort. And getting back to the question, as opposed to that, like this very simple perspective that I have is like, KSQ says, well, we're gonna go do this thing at MD Anderson. We're gonna effectively put all of our eggs in one basket. If you understand what I'm saying. Like, was that ever a concern? Like, we know they're great. We know it's a fantastic team. We know the partnership down there is super strong, but we're still kind of putting all our eggs in one basket.
Yeah, it's a factor that we considered. But we also have to acknowledge, like, this is a starting point. And the purpose of the starting point is to let the product declare itself and the therapy declare itself. if we get the results that we hope to see, from there, it's very easy then to go into more of a standard multi-center trial where the clinical development plan would increase significantly in scope. We knew it was a risk, or I wouldn't even call it a risk. We knew it was a factor, understood it, but the way to mitigate that factor was to just develop those relationships with Jason and with the PIs at MD Anderson ahead of time so that we could get comfortable with the fact that this was going to be our starting place. And then we can expand from there when the time's right in the clinical development program.
Yeah. I think the last time we chatted about this, I think I alluded to that question. And Jason, I want to give you the opportunity to give me some color that you gave me the last time we talked, because now I'm remembering that conversation, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I think your response was like, you have to understand that most of the eggs are in this basket, right? Following with my right. So give us a little bit on that, Jason.
I think Matt, when I initially started talking to MD Anderson, everyone sort of knows MD Anderson by reputation and knows the #1 cancer center. But it's amazing when you actually look at the scale and magnitude of their impact in oncology, and specifically oncology research and development of novel products. So a few stats for you. 80% of patients that are treated at MD Anderson are on a clinical trial. So it's not many standard of care.
Yeah.
60% of all oncology products that are approved in the US have run a clinical study at MD Anderson. So all roads lead through MD Anderson. If you look at the number of patients on clinical trials at MD Anderson versus other medical centers, MD Anderson is #1, as I've alluded to, but they have more patients on clinical trials than numbers 2 and 3 put together. And so the scale and magnitude of the clinical operation at MD Anderson is just like incredible. And so that mitigates these risks, or instead of a risk, you almost see it as a strength, where you have the patient volume. There's always risk when you run multiple site studies of, are you going to get consistent results? All those sites, not only logistical challenges, but practical. Are you going to treat the samples the same way and everything? By having a single site, we can eliminate a lot of those variables. And again, like Tom said, let the product declare itself. And the other thing I would just note that's really important for cell therapy as opposed to other traditional modalities is basically in the first 10 to 15 patients, you can see efficacy signals. Can most often do. Sometimes in the first patient. Now, so that's amazing. I mean, as opposed to antibodies where we intentionally dose at sub-efficacious doses, do single dose cohorts to begin to really explore safety. Because these are single dose treatments that can expand in the body, you can often see effects early on. But that also, the flip side of that is, if you haven't seen an effect in 15 patients, people are going to start to be concerned. It's not like an antibody where you do that for 45 patients before you know whether it works. And the last thing I'll say is on this topic these are very powerful therapies, cell therapies, and there can be extreme severe adverse events. Mm-hmm. Having a clinical team that is extraordinarily experienced with these modalities and how to deal with those adverse events and limit the impact of those and blunt the impact of those and turn a significant event and prevent it from becoming, unfortunately, like a death is super critical for companies in this delicate first 15 patients when you're still establishing and letting the product declare itself. Yeah. And so that's another thing that actually mitigates a risk. Like you're not going to get better care of the patients on a clinical trial anywhere in the world than MD Anderson, I can confidently say.
Yeah. Thomas, anything that you would add to the, I guess, advantages specific to KSQ of that logistical connection between CTMC and MD Anderson, and projections on how you think that'll continue to benefit KSQ as you get deeper into clinical trials?
Other than to just say how terrific are the PIs that we get to work with there. They are fantastic to work with. They know how to rapidly identify a patient and progress them through screening and enrollment so that they can get to a therapy that gives them the best chance of a positive outcome, and they know how to do it quickly. So it's been a really positive experience in working with the PIs there. We feel fortunate.
Yeah. I just looked at the clock and realized that we're running a little bit tight on time here, guys. I feel like we probably should have made this a 3-hour episode. There's lots to talk about, and you guys are fantastic. But let me stop right now before we get into sort of next steps and ask you, what haven't I asked you? If I were doing a better job here about the partnership, the relationship, where it stands right now. What part of the story are we missing? What haven't I asked you that I should have? Or did I do such a bang up job that we're like?
I mean, Matt, it was an amazing job you did. Let me just say, I mean,
everything that comes before the butt is a lie, they say.
That's why I did. That's why I said, did I say butt? I mean, I think what's interesting for me for next steps in life cycle of CTMC is what comes after positive first in human results, and how do we enable patients, or how do we enable partners to move to next stages of development, most efficiently. And our approach to that is to basically provide optionality. So one of the reasons I didn't quite get a chance to mention this early on, but we almost 2 years ago, we spun out from being part of MD Anderson into a joint venture that's a 50-50 joint venture between MD Anderson and National Resilience. And so Resilience is a really innovative, ambitious company trying to revolutionize complex biologics manufacturing, and has cell therapy capabilities. And so we enable an on-ramp to Resilience. We enable, if partners want to build internal capabilities, we would help them design and tech transfer to their own facility. Or we also have capabilities in the facility to carry out late stage and perhaps one day even launch products. So I think it's an important thing to understand that we've really thought about this. We don't want it to be a dead end, like, oh, wow, this is amazing. You get to see that your product, like we've talked about a few times, declares itself. It's a fantastic product. And then we're stuck and have to reverse out of a dead end and go somewhere else. We've really thought a lot about that. As the partnerships mature that we have and they get to more mid-stage trials, we'll be able to showcase some more of how we thought about that as well.
Yeah. One thing I failed to ask, and I think we briefly touched on this the last time we all chatted, was sort of the win together, lose together elements of the partnership. And I don't remember exactly what the details were there, but is there some element of like, hey, if KSQ wins, CTMC wins beyond just, winning for the patient from a business perspective. And if KSQ loses, we're going to lose a little bit too. We got skin in the game. Well, am I making that up, or was that a real part of this conversation?
I don't know if we talked about it, but I agree with it. I mean, aligned incentives in our collaboration drive all the right behaviors. But there's really not a lot that feels transactional about the collaboration that we have. And I think the result of that mindset is that when something unexpected happens, and we talked about this, the unexpected things are going to happen. The first and really only questions that we focus on are what's the right thing to do here for the long-term interest of the program. And I think that it's amazing how fast you can go together when you don't necessarily let other things get in the way.
Yeah.
And it enables it reinforces that kind of culture that we talked about and that trust that you know, if it's just human nature, if you're incentivized to do more services and you say, hey, I really think we should do more services when we have this problem, it's only natural for the partner to say, do they really think that, or do they just want to charge us more fees? But here, we align things so that, if we didn't bring the first product to IND, we would have, honestly lost money on the collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
So we would have been, in the hole. And that's okay. I'm fine. Like, we looked at everything that KSQ had. We felt really confident that we could help accelerate them get into the clinic. And so we put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, not having like intimate knowledge of all sorts of outsourced manufacturing partner relationships. That sounds pretty unique to me. Tom, is that pretty unique?
I think you can craft, there are an infinite number of ways to craft an agreement. I think Jason has gone all in. Jason and his team have gone really all in on that model. And it's driven the cultural and scientific and collaboration things that we've been talking about for the last hour.
Yeah. Super cool. All right. Like I said, I got to wrap things up. We're going to have to do a part 2 if there's more to talk about. And there will be more to talk about regardless, because, this project has got a long way to run. So we will. Well, I'm going to put you on the hook to do a part 2.
And Matt, just to say, because you gave that lead in, I know we're super at time.
Yeah.
But that's the neat thing about autologous cell therapy too, or at least the difference too. Unlike antibodies, like these partnerships, you're together every step of the way. Every single patient is a new patient comes in, more manufacturing has to be done. So it's like an ongoing relationship. Unlike an antibody where you work with a CMO, they make a big batch, and then you don't talk to them for 3 years as you run your clinical study. And maybe you call them up 2 years from now, like, hey, we need another batch. Can you make one? So it's a very different relationship. Mm-hmm. And it's just important to recognize those differences. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'll let you.
That's good, Jason. No, you're more than welcome. It's your time. I mean, I know you've got things to do this afternoon.
I gotta go do some work for Tom, I think, but
you're giving me your time. Yeah, that's a great segue. Work for Tom. What's that work entail in the immediate future? Like what's on your near-term horizon in terms of next steps or big projects between the two of you?
Well, I can start. I think that we're really excited about things both in the near term and long term. For starters, we talked about the platform earlier on. There's more that our platform can reveal about potential targets. We're not done. Mm-hmm. I think also out there on the horizon, as we start to build a clinical data set for our existing candidates, 001EX and 004EX, there are some really powerful correlative analyses that we can do to feed back into the process and improve our process and potentially even guide future clinical development. So that's way out there. Mm-hmm. But if we think even more near term, we're excited to be able to move both 001EX and eventually 004EX into the clinic. And for that lead candidate, 001, that first engineered TIL therapy that's already had its IND cleared, up next for us is clinical enrollment and data readouts. And we feel like with Jason's team, we've de-risked it as much as we can. We've controlled what we can control. The team at KSQ has been fantastic. The team at CTMC has been fantastic. And we're now ready to execute. And as patients enroll and clinical outcomes start to become available, I think you, me, clinicians at MD Anderson, and patients from all around the country and researchers around the globe, for that matter, are going to see what we see. So stay tuned. And I think the next chapter might be a pretty exciting part of the story.
Yeah.
Tom said that so well. And if we even zoom out further, KSQ has developed, some of the leading, what I would call like second generation optimized TILs. TILs as a field is at a super exciting stage. I won't unpack that whole thing, but we know that Iovance had the first commercial TIL approved a couple months ago. These are the first cell therapies approved for solid tumors. TILs have the ability to work in multiple tumor types and indications. Solid tumors represent 90% of all cancers. So KSQ is like in a amazing catbird seat, I think, of having a really fantastic technology, having a solid manufacturing and clinical setup to evaluate the real power of these next generation TILs.
Yeah. You mentioned Iovance, episode 78 of the Business Biotech podcast. There's a shameless plug here, featured Sumit Verma and Audrey Greenberg. Dug into this is back in 2021. You might say that we gave them a platform, for their approval.
Nice.
Not to pat myself on the
Okay.
back, but.
So 2021, so 3 years. So we'll start the clock for KSQ approval.
Jason, I was thinking exactly the same thing. Like,
this is a good place to be. We have not yet determined. We're 200 plus episodes into this podcast. We have not yet determined a Sports Illustrated cover curse yet. I think we're doing more good than harm. So
yeah, let's flip that around, and like all the good things that have come from the companies you've talked to.
Tom, the next chapter that you reference, I'm looking forward to covering it. And I do mean it. I'd love to have you guys back a little bit down the road to talk about further progress and more benefits of the collaboration and partnership down there. But for now, I want to thank you for coming on the show. You're both fantastic. I appreciate the time that you spent with us, the great insight, the transparent insight into the relationship. And I think we probably made a whole lot of people out there mad about their current partnership situation. So we'll call that a job well done.
It's been a pleasure.
If we can help people figure out ways of accelerating cell therapies, that would be fantastic. So Matt, thanks for giving us the platform, and thanks for the discussion. We really enjoyed it.
Look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, we will. Thanks, guys. So that's CTMC co-founder and CEO Jason Bach and KSQ Chief Technology Officer Thomas Leach. I'm Matt Pillar, and you just listened to The Business of Biotech. We're produced by Life Science Connect and its community of learning, solving, and sourcing resources for all manner of life sciences professionals. I invite you to subscribe to the Business of Biotech podcast anywhere you like to listen. Go to bioprocessonline.com/BOB to sign up for our newsletter. Go to bioprocessonline.com, hit the listen and watch tab, and you can actually watch these conversations in person. Leave us some feedback. Give us a review. Be sure to subscribe to the monthly newsletter. And in the meantime, thanks for listening.